Nick Shirley reveals more about us than about the Somali community. His videos have been devastating because they showed huge fraud that is happening in Minnesota. I think it's probably just the tip of the iceberg in the state of Minnesota and definitely the tip of the iceberg in the United States. For people who are not familiar with the actual videos, there's a link in the show notes. But Nick Shirley, he's an independent journalist and YouTuber. He goes to places, talks to people, and uncovers things. For example, he went to Greenland. He spoke with people in Greenland about whether they want to belong to the United States or not. He also went to Minnesota, and he looked for organizations that receive government subsidies for services such as childcare or elderly care. And in most of these cases, he uncovers truths that are not being revealed to us by the legacy media. And therefore, I would count him as an independent journalist and also as a big contributor to getting closer to the truth of the way our society functions. And I think his revelations about the Minnesota fraud show a lot more about our society than they reveal about the Somali community. Now, let me just give a few details of his revelations and then talk about the more important topic of this episode, which is, again, I think the conclusion that I draw about what it shows about our society. So what Nick actually does is he's cooperating with a whistleblower, a person that has access to information. Maybe it's not even a whistleblower, maybe it's a public information, which is even worse. But let's assume there is information available to people that show which organization receives how much money from the state and federal government based on services provided, specifically a daycare. So a daycare is a place where you can put your children to being taken care of while you're at work. Now there seems to be state and federal programs that subsidize daycares like this, where they say, look, if you take care of other people's kids so they can go and work, then we'll actually support you, so they don't have to pay the high price that something like this would require. The idea is actually a very good idea. You have immigrants like the Somali community in Minnesota. They usually are living paycheck to paycheck. They have to work, wife and husband and cousin and grandmother, and everybody has to chip in. So nobody has time to take care of kids. So therefore, how about the government helps these people by subsidizing child daycare? Now that's the idea, and I think so far, I don't think you'll find a lot of people who oppose this. But then, unfortunately, the reality is that a lot of these daycares are just fronts to receive public money. There are no children being taken care of, and therefore this is fraud. And the fraud is so bad that what Nick Shirley uncovered is tens and tens of millions of dollars of fraud. There's a lot more details to this. There are transportation companies which are also being used. So transportation companies being companies that actually transport kids to daycares or elderly people. The same applies, by the way, to elderly people. If you have your grandma that needs to be taken care of and you have to go to work, you can put that grandma in a facility, and then that facility receives federal or state subsidies, so you don't have to pay the high prices for this. I've been there myself. My dad got sick, and he was in a facility in Switzerland, which cost us a lot of money, even though half of the price was still subsidized. Even that was very high. So I can see why, as a society, we want to do this. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem, of course, is the fraud. Now, what this shows is a couple of things. One is the corrupt, evil attitudes of the Somali community. And I think nobody should be surprised. I mean, you bring people from a country like Somalia, you can't expect them to be different than the way they are in that country. You might expect occasionally people to be different, but as a whole, particularly when they're highly concentrated, and I've always advocated for this. I am absolutely for immigration, but I'm against high concentration of immigrants in a particular area, because there's a couple of things that play. First, it's very difficult for those, even those who want to integrate themselves into the society that they're immigrating into. And you might actually think that the majority of these people, and I still think the jury's out for that, but I would say that the majority actually wants to integrate with, let's say, our society, because that's why they came. I mean, I don't think a lot of people enjoy living in failed states like Somalia. So that's not the point. The point is, when they come here and they get highly concentrated in very narrow places like, let's say, Minneapolis, they really don't have a chance. They have the same peer pressures, the same, whatever social dynamics are at game, they are still playing at game. And I've seen this with communities like the Albanian community in Switzerland. I think the Hispanics here in California. There are also counterexamples. I think Asian Americans are highly concentrated in Silicon Valley, but they're still, creating a culture that is at least distinct from, let's say, China. It's not the American culture that we are used to, but it's a different culture, and it's certainly a culture that works. I mean, Silicon Valley is very successful. You can also add the Indian community here that, again, is maybe creating a new type of culture here in Silicon Valley, but it's certainly not the kind of culture that they brought back from India. So it's a new culture, a culture of performance, of high achievement, of accountability. They're very successful as entrepreneurs. They're very successful also as executives in tech companies. So you can certainly not complain about their performance. But again, when you have high concentration, it just becomes very difficult typically for immigrants. Let's say the Hispanic community in California has very high problems, such as even speaking English is difficult. If everybody around you speaks Spanish and your kids grow up with a friend speaking Spanish, it's just a little bit more difficult. So I would say one of the big lessons of any kind of immigration failure is always, like, bring the people. It's okay, but have them, spread them around. Don't concentrate them. That will be just a sort of a side note here. But back to Nick Shirley's revelations. I think, again, they show a lot more about us than they do about the Somali community, which I just looking at a couple of those videos that he's showing. They're very, very violent, aggressive. I can see how difficult it is even within the community to oppose what they're doing. There's a couple of warlords or chieftains who run the whole show, and if you dare to speak up, good luck for you. So I think there's definitely huge violence-driven culture that is dominating this society. But that's not surprising them, because that's where they came from. What's shocking is more our own reaction to this. First, I think the sort of obvious shocking reaction is that the left, whether it's CNN or left-wing people or Democrats in general, are actually opposing Nick Shirley. They're attacking him, and instead of being shocked at the fraud that is happening, that is undermining our democracy, that is undermining our social welfare, they are shocked at Nick Shirley. And that just shows just a malfunction of legacy media at scale that is, even today, still shocking. Now, people like Sean Ryan are saying, well, it's okay, they're going to go out of business anyway. But I still think this is not good enough. I think what the least we could do is really cut any kind of federal subsidies, licensing subsidies, or any kind of privileges that legacy media is enjoying, because they're just not doing their job. So that's one thing. I think the other thing, which is also highly shocking, is the amount of corruption that is happening within our political system, whether it's Tim Walz or the mayor of Minnesota, whether it's the judges that are holding a blind eye on fraud in Minnesota, and the Somali chieftains, or the same thing happening in California. So the judicial system and the political system are not opposing this. They're actually even promoting this, because, and that's the third thing, which is this revealing, is it helps them retain power. And this is, I'm sure, in my opinion, this is the most serious problem here, which is that in a majority vote system that we have, like, the founding fathers wrote a constitution 250 years ago that it did not account for illegal immigration, for bringing in people to buy votes, all that kind of stuff wasn't happening at scale, couldn't be happening at scale back then because it was just logistically impossible. So today we are in a situation where the mayor of Minnesota can bring in tens of thousands of Somalis, support them with fraudulent schemes, and retain power, and then maybe get a cut for himself, or at least help his cronies, including the Somali community, to enrich themselves while he retains the power, and then do other crazy things like woke-driven policies and God knows what else. So that's, of course, that's not how it's supposed to work. Like we can't have this is a race to the bottom, right? If you play this through in a game theoretic context, then what's the other side going to do? What are the Republicans going to do? They're going to bring in their version of immigrants. They're going to play their cronyism. We can't function like that. I think what we need as a society is we need defined borders and confines. We need also not just physical borders, but cultural borders. There's a certain type of person that belongs to this country, that abides to the Constitution and the values of this country, and those who don't belong here. I think it's for our own protection. You might call this bigotry. I don't care what you call it. I think what's important is, I'm a valuist, so I strongly believe in the values of people, and they can only cooperate if they share values. And if they don't share values, they shouldn't be together. In fact, I'm a proponent of segregation in the United States based on that, because I can see, having lived on the East Coast and now living on the West Coast, the value system on the West Coast is fundamentally different than what we're seeing on the East Coast. And you can go state by state, whether it's a state like California, a state like Texas, a state like Nevada, a state like Massachusetts. Like the values are pretty different, and therefore I question whether we even should be a union at this point. Maybe some sort of segregation would be more advantageous. But that's for a different episode. I think the most important problem that I always come back to in this podcast and generally in my discussions of fraud and corruption, it's the Federal Reserve System. Because you see, when you're the central bank of the world, when you print the currency that everybody in the world accepts, then you own everything in the world. And therefore you can buy votes, you can buy weapons, you can buy precious metals, you can buy political power, you can buy anything you want. And our political class has figured out a way to take advantage of that. And that's why we have 40 trillion in debt. So I think the core of this problem isn't even the Democrats who are taking advantage of this at scale that is unprecedented. It's the Federal Reserve itself. So in other words, if we wanna stop this, the only way we can stop this corruption, this grifting and stealing, and also buying votes and undermining democracy dynamics, is through curbing the money. We have to go after the money. We have to stop the flow of dollars. We have to make money more scarce. Money is a market itself. It's supposed to be a scarce resource like everything else, and people should fight for it in the open market with their products and services, and not just political influence and money printing like we have right now. I think that's the core of the problem. I think therefore this is an appeal to anybody who has the power, the knowledge, and the will to save our democracy. And we're celebrating 250 years of the United States Constitution. So this is a very timely, I think it's very timely. In order to save this amazing experiment that started in 1776, I think we need to curb our ability to print money and own everything that is, dollar-based, which is basically the whole world, because that's creating this complacency and corruption. And I think we're engulfed by a political class. This is certainly, the Democrats are much worse, and I would always pick a Republican over a Democrat, no matter what, because what the Democrats did under Biden and during COVID is unacceptable. It's Orwellian, and therefore I can't trust them. But I also see how the other side, for example, was opposing Doge and Elon Musk, and therefore showed their hand that they are also not interested in really curbing the corruption because they're in it themselves. So having said that, I think the only solution again is to cut the money, cut the budgets, get some scarcity and accountability into the political system. Because if you can't just willy-nilly spend money everywhere, you are going to be forced to spend it on what's more efficient and what's better for society. So the conclusion, I think what Nick Shirley shows is the malfunction of our society. It doesn't show the malfunction of Somalia. It's not about Somalia. Yeah, maybe we should deport some of these people or put some people in jail. I'd be in favor of at least prosecuting Tim Walz and the mayor of Minnesota and bring people to justice. But the problem is our society, and we have to, have a more balanced approach towards these types of things. They can't all be partisan, because we're going to destroy our own, the golden goose that is giving us this beautiful life that we have here in the United States. And I think the best way to do this is through money, through the budget cuts, through curbing the money printing ability of the Federal Reserve and the access to dollars by Congress and politicians. Thank you.